Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year or so, I've been doing a series called Les Filles du Roi, the King's Daughters. This is my latest series, Les Filles à Marier. If les filles du roi were the founding mothers, then les filles à marier are the grandmothers. And their stories are so deep and part of Quebec real history that I can't even begin to tell you how much, even as I go into the research. I thought I knew stuff. I know more now. And so please join me as we explore this amazing part of Quebec history. But before we begin episode 7, let's have a look at ways you can support the channel. The first 3 keep you in the know. It's subscribe, like, and notify, so you get notified when I post new content. And the next 3 are ways to make the channel grow. We have coffee, Etsy, and Patreon. All of these are more focused on supporting the channel financially and helping it to sustain itself, if you will. So with further ado, let's talk about episode 7, La Fille Mariée of this week. Les Filles Mariées was a program, not even really an organized program. It was just between 1634 and 1662, a process in which individual girls would come over. They were more than likely not sponsored, certainly not sponsored by the king, but they would be, for example, helped along by a church or somebody who knew somebody, that sort of thing. So it was a very informal kind of grouping, if you will. And they were selected to come to Quebec and to marry. Peter J. Gagne, in his excellent book, kind of identifies the criteria for a fille mariée. And a fille mariée needed to be between these ages. They needed to not be coming along with their parents or having brought children along. There are different criteria, and they had to marry in order to be a marriageable girl. So just because you came over, you had to actually, sign the contract, so to speak, and then you were part of that collective. There are about 260 filles mariées, so you can imagine between 1634 and 1662, 32 years or 28 years, and we only had 200 girls. Not all of them produced children. So it became obvious at some point that this was not going to grow a country. And that is why Les Filles du Roi, the state-sponsored program, came into being. So let us see those first brave pioneers who came along just because they could. So let's get to know this episode's Fille Mariée. And now we come to episode 7, Marguerite-Madeleine Morisseau. She was originally a viewer request, so I'm so happy to be able to do that. And of course, I looked in my files, and guess what? She's mine too. And also, the boy next door that I grew up with all those years ago, it's also his great-grandmother as well. So I'm sure that we're going to find lots and lots of people who are related to this wonderful lady. Let's get to know her. So Marguerite-Madeleine was born in 1642 in a commune. Remember, commune means township, in Rouen, France. And the region of France that she would have been from is called the Hauts-de-France. And the département, or county, as we would call it, is the département de Somme. Her parents were Julienne Morisseau and Anne Bré-Lancourt. And the church that she would have been baptized in was called the Saint Pierre Church, which basically dates from the 11th century. 1184 is the first time that it is actually mentioned. It was rebuilt in the 16th century, around 1535. The church was largely destroyed during the Great War, and after that conflict, it was rebuilt. So essentially, it's gone through, but that is exactly, so if I ever go to France, which is on my bucket list, that would be the church I would be staring at, because on that ground, she would have been baptized. And then we have just kind of a modern day view of Rouen, and just, kind of a very typical, beautiful French City. So let's get to know her journey. So sometime around 1661, she would arrive in New France. I don't have the information as to the ship or that sort of thing, but we know she was here because she found herself a groom. Well, the fellow that she found was already in New France. His name was François Petit d'Antaïa, and he was born in 1635 in the commune called Gallardon, France, which is located in the Centre-Val de Loire region of France. You can see it on the map. It's kind of like right smack in the middle, which is why it's called Centre. And inside of that region, we have a département or county, and he is from the Eure-et-Loire département, and that is where the small town is located. Today, the population is about 3,600. The church that you see above you on the third picture is l'Église, the church Saint Pierre and Saint Paul, Saint Peter and Saint Paul Church, which dates from the 12th century and then was rebuilt in the 13th as well. And just the aerial shot of the small village, just beautiful. Now, his parents are kind of, for right now, they're the stars of the show because Nicolas Pelletier and Jeanne de Vouzé are famous and are part of the real pioneer stock of Quebec. In fact, the doctor who was present at my birth, his name was Pelletier. So Pelletier is a very, very old name and a very strong name in Quebec. So let's get to know this Pelletier family. So the Pelletiers arrived in New France sometime around 1636 to 1641. What we know, and that's depending on the sources that you find, what we know is that our subject, François, was just a baby when he made the perilous trip to New France. His father, Nicolas, was a master carpenter who worked on the Habitation de Québec, which was, as you may know, was created by Samuel Champlain in 1608. By 1645, his father, Nicolas, was granted the land in Sillery. 50 arpents, which is about 30 to 40 acres of land, which could be found on the route Saint-Xavier. He would continue to build important buildings in New France, including the parts of the Notre-Dame Quebec Church and the Château Saint-Louis, which was the official residence of the governor of New France. So they were really, among the royalty of Quebec. They were really, really early inhabitants. So they made their mark. Now, François, our subject, his first marriage was to a native in New France, and he was probably married, we don't have the record, he was probably married around 1660. And unfortunately, she did pass away. There was no descendancy from that marriage. And we are told that Antaïa is in honor of, so his name also known as Antaïa. And so many of his descendants took that name. But his original name, of course, was Petit. So let's get to know how they connect the dots between our fille Marie-Madeleine, or Marguerite-Madeleine, I should say, and François. So François and Marguerite were married on September 26, 1661. So we know at that point that sometime in 1661, his first wife would have passed away. And that is their marriage record. So François and Marguerite would settle in Sillery. Let's talk a little bit about Sillery. It's now one of the boroughs of Quebec City, but for well over 3 centuries, it was its own independent city. In 2002, Sillery, along with other small cities, was amalgamated into the larger region of Quebec City. So if you visit Quebec City, Sillery will be part of it. It was first established as Canada's very first Indian reserve. So there you get the connection between François' first wife and probably why he was able to connect and meet a native. It was first named Saint Joseph, and the money for establishing the first settlement was provided by Noël Brulard de Sillery. Unfortunately, the native population fell victim to disease and other issues, and the reserve failed. The town was eventually named Sillery in honor of its benefactor and would become an important part of Quebec's lumber industry. On the upper left of your screen is a picture of Sillery's riverfront. I've included a map of where Sillery is, and also on the top right of how it has become amalgamated within Quebec City. So you can kind of see. Now, on the bottom right is the Maison des Jesuits of Sillery, de Sillery, or the Jesuits' House of Sillery. A fort was created here in the mid-1600s and would have been present during their time. This actual house was one built after the fort burnt down twice and dates from 1703 to 1730 for the construction. So it is extremely historic. And here we have the census for 1667, which would be François Pelletier, 32, Marguerite, his wife, Marie, and notice how they always include her maiden name. Don't you wish that all genealogy was like that? Marie, 5, François Xavier is 4, Joseph is 2, and then they have a small baby, Marguerite-Agnes is 15 months. So together they would go on to have 10 children. Their firstborn, Marie-Angélique, who happens to be my descendant line, married a man named François Van Layac, and they had 9 children, 8 of whom made it. But the boy next door is also related to this one, so that's his line as well. We're really, really related. François Xavier married Madeleine Tournay and had 1 child before his early death at 34. Joseph would pass away in infancy. Marguerite-Agnes would marry Charles Boucher and have 11 children, 9 of whom made it. Geneviève would marry Jacques Gagne and have 7 children, 5 of whom would make it. Catherine would marry Denis Foucault and have 3 children, all of whom made it. Michel would marry Françoise Minot and have 10 children, all of whom would make it. Jean-Baptiste Pierre would marry Marguerite Rousseau and have 6 children, 5 of whom made it. Elizabeth would have passed away in infancy, and Louise married Jean-Baptiste de Blois and died at 25 without any descendants. Very sad. So remember when I said they were such early pioneers and began acquiring land? Well, by 1675, François Marguerite bought the seigneurie of Orvellier, which shortly after became known as the seigneurie of Antaya. Finally, it is the children of François Marguerite who will bear the name Antaya and who will transmit it to their children, who will also do the same. On October 22nd, 1675, François purchases an estate from Philippe Gauthier, Sœur de Comporte. The frontage runs 1 demi-lieue, which is about 1.5 miles, along the St. Lawrence River, across from Sorel, between the Autrey and Berthier estates, and it extends inland 1 lieue, which is about 3 miles. François and Marguerite now merit the title Sœur and Seigneuress, not to denote their nobility, but to reflect the esteem of their peers. François renames his land Antaya, discontinuing d'Orvellier and Comporte, names it as his home in the past, but in some later notarized and baptismal acts, we see d'Orvellier is sometimes used. 2 years after this purchase, the Pelletier family establishes itself as Antaya. François, having sold his 80 hectare property in Sorel to Pierre Courtois in September of 1677. From the 1681 census of New France, we see that François maintains 16 hectares of cattle and possesses 3 muskets with which to defend his family and homestead. The census places François at Autrey, but what is most likely the case is that Antaya, which neighbors Autrey, was simply counted under Autrey. From the Des map, 1685 map, we see that Antaya is a separate estate sitting between Autrey and Berthier, as described in the 1675 Bill of Sale. So that gives you an idea of like the intricacy of all of this, information about how they purchased land and that sort of thing. But really amazing, to understand the importance that they would have had and their impact. And so we have the seigneurie, we have François and Marguerite. Their children at that point in 1681 would be François, Joseph, Marguerite, Geneviève, Catherine, Michel, Pierre, Louise. And again, we mentioned the 3 guns and the 20 bêtes à cornes, which are 20 goats, and 16 arpents, which is about 12 to 14 acres of land. So in a surprising twist of fate, Marguerite would take command of the fur trading business that Francois had been involved in upon his death. We don't have a death date. It's possible he died in one of these expeditions, but she would become an engageuse, which meant that she would hire people who would go out and get furs, voyageurs, and basically become her own business owner in a time when women were not that. So I'm very, very proud of my great-grandmother for being able to take the reins, so to speak. Through my research, I have the kind of a PDF book of the deaths that occurred at the Hôtel Dieu in Quebec during these very, very formative years. And this is Marguerite's death record, saying that she died at 70 years old. Her name is Marguerite Brisson. I have no idea why she's called this, an error, but it's obvious that it's her. Femme de François Pelletier, décédée le 15 décembre, died on the 15th of December, and she would be buried at the Hôtel Dieu Cemetery. And the legacy continues. We have l'Association des Familles Pelletier, which I will probably investigate and join. Very, very proud of this association I have. Wonderful website, and I've included the link for you in the notes. So if this is your descendancy and you would like more information, certainly just the information they have on the website is amazing. So have a look at that to give you even more information. As always, I love to give you more resources. Because these are the pioneer families of Quebec, I really wanted to focus on some of the societies that honor them. So we have the Quebec Family History Society. We have the French-Canadian Heritage Society of Michigan. We have the American-Canadian Genealogical Society, and of course the American-French Genealogical Society. All of these are amazing, amazing groups that promote and have lots and lots of resources. Some of the other websites that I use are Quebec Genealogical Society, which is a membership based. We also have Généalogie Québec, which is also a paying website. Généalogie du Québec d'Amérique française, Nos Origines is its name, is one I use, and it's free. And then we have Maple Stars and Stripes, which is a podcast, which is done by Sandra Goodwin, who is just amazing and is an idol of mine. I've learned so much from her, continue to learn all the time. And a new edition is called The French-Canadian Genealogist. It's a wonderful website with lots and lots of resources. So I urge you to have a look at that, and just a very good kind of a website that gives you a very broad perspective of the Quebec experience. So I would definitely have a look at that. All of the links are in the notes. And so we end episode 7. Marguerite-Madeleine Morisseau was a remarkable woman, marrying into already a pioneering family of New France. And in the end, she and François would produce over 222 descendants as of 1729. And so just a remarkable descendancy. But more than that, you can clearly see that she was a woman ahead of her time, that she was able to carry on his work in the business, and was in her own right a woman of substance. And for that, we thank her for her contribution. We bless her memory, and we are grateful that she came to our shores. And for my own personal, I'm very, very happy to have great-grandma Marguerite-Madeleine as one of mine. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on episode 8 of Les Filles Mariées. Au revoir.